What is up, you guys, and welcome back to my channel. In today's video, I'm going to be giving you some very practical steps that you can take whenever your spouse is not on board with what you want to do with your finances, or at the very least, the direction that you want to go with your finances. And I really want to encourage you guys right from the get-go that you are not alone in this struggle. It is very painful when your spouse is not on board and they don't see money the way that you do, whether that is they're spending on things that are not a priority to you, or they don't want you to spend money on things, or they want to save money, or they don't want to save money. It's very painful no matter what. When your goals are not aligned, it is a struggle, and you are not alone in that. Even in my own life, Ethan and I don't always agree at first what we should do with our money or where our money should go, and it sucks, but we have learned to find a healthy compromise and to learn to communicate about our goals and our desires and what we want to do with our money. I want to explain first that how you actually structure your money can eliminate probably close to half of your money disagreements. And I know you're already very aware that there are tons of people on either end of this combining finances spectrum. For example, on one end of the spectrum, we have Dave Ramsey, who has very openly stated that when you get married, you should combine all of your finances, and that means everything: income, savings, debt, all of it. Ramit Sethi is on the very end of the completely other side of the spectrum, and he actually went as far as to have his wife sign a prenup when they got married, so that if they were to get a divorce, his business, all of his money would remain his. And when you really think about it, this is pretty crazy. These are both huge financial gurus that I really respect a lot, and they are saying completely opposite things when it comes to marriage and money. How can these financial gurus be on such opposite ends of the spectrum when it comes to this? And here's a big part of the problem, is that personal finance and the workforce as a whole is not nearly as straightforward as it used to be. Think about the workforce and personal finance in the 50s and the 60s and the 70s. Generally speaking, we had way more one income households. Consumerism was much lower and divorce was much lower, making this 100% possible. One person in the family, generally the husband, would go to work and he would support his wife and all of his kids, and this was the norm. And we have seen a huge shift in what the family really looks like over the past 20 to 30 years. We've had a huge increase in divorce. Both spouses are working most of the time, and one income households are simply not the norm anymore. And so personal finance within these households are so much more complicated than they used to be. For example, in this video right here, I share personally our 7 streams of income with 2 more in the works. In our grandparents' generation, that was completely unheard of, and in our parents' generation, it was highly, highly unlikely. With all of that in mind, cut yourself some slack and cut your spouse some slack. At this point, we are all the guinea pigs on what it looks like to manage multiple streams of income within a marriage together. I mentioned that Dave Ramsey was on one end of the spectrum, Ramit was on the other end of the spectrum. I definitely fall in the middle, but more toward combining finances with your spouse, with several asterisks then underneath that. The issue with the blanket statement that all married couples need to have 100% combined finances is that this doesn't really work for spouses that own businesses, that work as 1099 full-time contractors or part-time freelancers. And as I explained earlier, this is no longer a very small, slim minority of America. This is becoming more and more prominent, and the entrepreneurial spouse is going to be solely responsible for the actions and the decisions that are made within the scope of what they do. For example, I love my husband, but he does not have any experience or really any desire to run a business, especially the admin side of things. He is a salaried W-2 employee, which is like the most straightforward type of income, and he just isn't involved with my side of things when it comes to stuff that goes on inside the business. The majority of clients that come to me and the clients that I work with have some sort of irregular or highly volatile income, like being a 1099 full-time contractor, or they own a business, or they're in sales or commissioned of some sort. And this stuff is really tough to manage. That's why we work together. With that being said, trying to reach your goals, trying to make progress with multiple checking accounts, multiple savings accounts, multiple credit cards, being unorganized and having his account and her account and cash flow issues and credit cards are piling up, trying to keep everything separate and everything is everywhere, that is going to hold you back. If you simply structured your money better with your spouse, consolidated accounts, and streamlined everything, money would be so much easier for you. I honestly can't even imagine trying to budget from like 6 or 7 different accounts and track what's his and what's mine, and you are setting yourself up for failure when you do this. Stuff will slip through the cracks and it will be difficult and time consuming to manage. And like I said earlier, I know logistically it's not as simple as just combine finances when you get married and then all your problems are solved. We have businesses, we have freelancing, 1099 work, etc. And I know I haven't even addressed the emotional side of this. We're literally just talking about the logistical side of combining finances. So there's a whole other emotional side to this that I'll get to in a second. But the whole point of this very long-winded intro is that simplifying and combining finances will allow you to really have the control that you want over your money. It will allow you to budget more efficiently, and ultimately you'll be able to start making progress and moving forward. And it doesn't have to happen overnight. It can be a process, but trust me when I say eliminating frivolous accounts, combining finances, and ultimately simplifying the process will pay off in the long run. This is something that I have walked my clients through, and I currently walk my clients through with great results. So there is so much progress and there's so many goals to be achieved on the other side of combining and simplifying the structure of your money. And a quick note here before we dive in, don't shy away from seeking out professional help in this area. A counselor or a coach or a mentor, depending on your needs, is a great investment of money and time. Don't shy away from getting professional help. Definitely keep that in mind as I go through these practical steps and things that you can start today. My very first point, and something that you need to do as soon as possible if this applies to you, is that there can be nothing hidden financially from your spouse. You cannot skip this one. If you try to skip step number 1 and move on to step number 2, this process is not going to work for you, and this video really is going to be a waste of your time. Before you move on, you must come clean to your spouse if you are hiding money. And this even means if you're hiding money to quote unquote protect them from themselves. I once had a client that was hiding money from his wife because he didn't want her to be tempted to spend the money. And that's not okay. You can't hide money from your spouse under any circumstances because you're, in a sense, parenting your spouse. You don't parent your spouse. They're your spouse, not your child. Accomplishing and getting past step number 1 might take some time to really process and plan out exactly what you're going to say. I would also add in that forgiving your spouse and forgiving yourself would also fall under step number 1. Remember that this is a process, but there is a lot of emotional and really relational progress that needs to happen here before we can move on to step number 2. Step number 2 is to normalize talking about money without fighting about money. And this is huge. When money is a point of contention for my clients, I give them one of my resources called Weekly Money Meeting. And it's basically a set of questions that I have them go through together at some point throughout each week. And the questions are very non-confrontational. They're very objective, and it's really just to get them to normalize talking about money. I very intentionally structured the questions so that there is no complaining, there's no finger pointing or blaming. They're very matter-of-fact, objective questions, or they're very service-oriented questions like, how can I best support you in this upcoming week? I find that when someone DMs me or private messages me, how do I get my spouse on board? What advice do you have? I find that they're already very much past having pleasant conversations with their spouse about money. Every time that money comes up with their spouse, it starts with the blaming, and it's very tense and it's uncomfortable, and then the excuses pop up, and so they just end up not talking about money at all. Before we can start to really make meaningful progress with our money, we need to normalize and have very regular, everyday conversations with our spouse about money, free of conflict first. Even if it's at first a very short conversation, it doesn't have to be super in-depth, just normalize talking about money. Step 3 is discussing each other's goals when it comes to money and the future of your family. At this point, we are building trust, we're forgiving, we're having normal conversations about money free of conflict, and hopefully we're consolidating and simplifying the accounts and how the money is structured. During step 3, you must be intentional about staying away from blame. We aren't talking about why we aren't meeting those goals or why we aren't making progress toward the goals. We're simply dreaming big and talking about the goals that we have for ourselves and for our family. Quick side note here, your goals and your dreams will most likely be different, and that is okay. Remember that this is all a big process. If you were looking for a single magical sentence that transforms your spouse's brain and completely erases the past, that does not exist. Trust the process and stay intentional with these steps. Step 4 is creating a budget or a 30-day plan that's going to get you one step closer to those goals that you just discussed in step 3. Remember, we aren't making this big 5-year, 10-year plan here. Just look at the next 4 weeks. What can you both do over the next 4 weeks to get you closer to both of your goals together? Sometimes during our sessions, I can tell that one spouse is really engaged, really on fire, and the other spouse is there, but they're not really there. You know what I mean? If you can tell that your spouse isn't all there, they are not engaged. Break it down further, shorten the conversation, and just focus on 1 week at a time. Weekly money conversations are a good idea anyway, so just bring it back to that and make sure you spend a little bit of time focusing on the budget and the plan for the week ahead. Also remember to bring it back to their goals. That's going to help them stay motivated and engaged. When they see progress, they're going to be more engaged. Here is a super important part of step number 4. We have taken the time to build trust and to normalize money conversations. Don't ruin it all by communicating to your spouse that their priorities and their dreams are dumb. Trust me, this is possible for you. Just because it's difficult doesn't mean it's impossible. So for example, I coached a couple where their goals were so far apart. One spouse really wanted to save for retirement, and they needed to save for retirement, and the other spouse wanted to spoil her kids beyond reason. As you can see, there is no overlap there. Those two goals are on completely opposite ends of the spectrum, and so we had to get really creative to make sure that both spouses felt like they were making progress toward both of those goals. Otherwise, one or both of them would have sabotaged the budget anyway. We had to learn to compromise, and we had to learn to get creative so that both goals happened. All that to say, even when your priorities don't align, you have got to come together and support each other as you work through that along the way. Step 5 is to get completely away from the parent-child relationship when it comes to money. Here are some ways that you can identify this harmful pattern in your marriage. One spouse controls the money, the other spouse gets an allowance. Spending blame, one-sided decisions, rebuking and discipline rather than grace and forgiveness. Sometimes one spouse makes way more than the other, and there's no healthy, consistent communication about money. And finally, past hurt that has not healed, so controlling or resentment is the result. I hope this video has helped you identify very practical steps that you can take in order to start mending this part of your marriage. And I want to reiterate again that seeking professional help when it comes to money in your marriage is highly advised. Advocate for yourself and for your marriage. Start with the things that you can change and go from there. If you got value out of this video today, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe, and I will see you in the next one, guys.